Hello. In the last video, we saw how to create a new project with Godspeed, how to add plugins, and also a walkthrough of the scaffolding of a Godspeed project with a basic introduction of the elements of Godspeed. In this video, we'll talk more about event sources, what are event sources, and in the subsequent video, we will dive deeper into events. And in the next video after that, we will dive deeper into writing your custom event sources. Now, for the sake of this video, let us start understanding what are event sources. So if you look at the architecture of Godspeed framework, here it is. If you look at the workflows or business logic, this is your core functions within your microservice, monolith, full stack app, or a serverless project. Okay. These are the functions which are triggered by different events. Events can be either an API kind of event, which are synchronous events. For example, REST API, gRPC API, GraphQL API, or they could be asynchronous events like those coming from a message bus, WebSocket, so on and so forth. Now, when these events come, they trigger workflows. And when before these workflows run, we do a series of things like validation of input of the event, authentication of the user, and authorization of the user. But that part will come to events when we dive deeper into events. Now, how are events triggered in a particular microservice? These are through event sources. Event sources can be multiple kinds. Event sources is basically anybody hitting your microservice API through various mechanisms like REST, gRPC, GraphQL, message bus. So your microservice is listening through various mechanisms for events from multiple event sources, which could be web apps, mobile apps, another microservice, a third-party application, a message bus, a cron job, a serverless kind of an event function running somewhere, which is calling your API. It could be change data capture events from your data store, relayed via message bus. So effectively, all of these different sources are throwing events at your service. How are these events through different mechanisms captured? These are through what we call in Godspeed event sources. So an event source could be a synchronous event source would be, for example, if we talk of API, it is your Express server or Fastify server for REST API services. It could be Apollo GraphQL server for GraphQL API event. Okay. It could be a gRPC service also. All of these are synchronous event sources. Then async event sources could be your clients listening on a message bus, for example, a Kafka kind of an event source, okay, or a RabbitMQ, or WebSocket kind of an event source. So, or even a Salesforce as an event source where you listen on Salesforce events. So basically, event sources in Godspeed are all those services or clients which help you expose your service to the internal microservices or external world to listen on events. Okay. In Godspeed, when you add an event source through the Godspeed plugin add command, Godspeed plugin add. Okay. Then Godspeed will give you a choice of different event sources that you can install in your project. For example, it could be cron job as an event source. It could be Salesforce as a data source and event source. It could be Express server also or a Fastify server. So these kind of event sources are then installed into your project here. So I've already installed these event sources, hence they are not coming out here in these options. So whichever event sources are not installed in your project, you will see options for them to be installed. So here we see Express Server, GraphQL, Kafka existing out here. So once you have installed these event sources into your project, you will see event sources types. These files have been created from default plugins supplied by Godspeed. In the later video, we'll see how you can write your own custom event sources. But whatever Godspeed already supplies to you, by default already achieves a lot, and for 19% of the projects that should be sufficient. If you want to customize it, you can set up your own custom implementations of event sources by overriding these files, which we will see later. Once you have installed the plugin, after that, you can basically check out different YAML files which have been created for your plugin. For example, if you installed Express, you will see an http.yaml which has been installed for you. The name of this file could be anything, http 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could run multiple Express services listening on different ports. Okay. Now here, as you see, once Express is running, I just need to configure my Express service. For example, the port it runs on, what is the size of the request body, what is the limit of the file size that I can upload. Okay. How do I authenticate? I'm using JWT authentication. Internally, the plugin uses passport JWT for running this authentication. You can configure these environment variables and configurations. I will come to it later. But for now, focus that you just configure your JWT authentication like this, and it will work. This is the default configuration. Then authorization. In authorization, if you see, this is event source level authorization, just like event source level authentication. Your event source, you can specify any authorization logic, which could be YAML workflows. So here you see, this is a first task. It's an array. If you see this array has this first task, it's an array of tasks in authorization. You can even have a TypeScript or a YAML file function written in your functions folder, and you can call an external function also out here, okay, which I will show to you shortly. But talking of event sources in authorization, you can call any TypeScript function, YAML work function, or write inline YAML here itself. For example, here I'm checking inputs.user.role must be admin or manager. Okay. Then event sources also provide validation of the input and output that you receive when an event is invoked, and the response you send as a response to that event in case of synchronous events. So if you want to customize your validation error responses, you can override these functions here. Again, here, this is your functions folder validations.request.standard response. If you go here, validations, request standard response.yaml, okay, is what we are calling here. You can just change it to TypeScript also and call standard response.typescript, and you can customize your validation error responses here for request and response both. Here I'm showing you both options, calling a function written externally, which you could even do here in Auth, and then also calling inline YAML right here, the Godspeed workflow of YAML, like in both. Now coming to event sources further. Every event source supports logging attributes. So when your log files will be printed, these attributes will also be printed for you to enable better debugging of your logs through your logs. This will not just help you in localhost debugging, but also when you run this service in production and you have open telemetry based backend client, you can search and filter through your logs based on these labels and scan those logs, see what is happening as well. Then the last bit in event sources is also, especially in case of sync event sources, REST event sources, is your Swagger specification, which is also automatically generated when your project starts. Your Swagger spec is partly taken from your event source definition. Here is a basic Swagger information. This is the endpoint my Swagger should run on. Okay, this is the information. These are the servers that should be running. Okay, this is Swagger stuff effectively. Then if you have set up JWT authentication, even this will be picked up and put in the Swagger as well. Here, the Swagger of your HTTP server is generated in docs folder within your project, and this is your Swagger spec if you see. And your security scheme JWT has been picked up, and as well your Swagger's basic information has been picked up. Your servers, info, everything has been picked up. All right. Now, even the definitions which exist in your project in definitions folder will be picked up and put here as components, schemas. Okay. So here we have, if you go to lending service DB, it has a user and a loan application. Okay. You will start seeing here schemas as well. User schema, loan application schema, these are all present here, which you can create with your examples. These examples will also go in the not just Swagger spec, but even in your Postman collection. It will help you put your sample requests with these examples within your single source of truth, your events Swagger specs, and your definitions out here. If you want to hear more about what is schema driven development and single source of truth, please read our blog. A very nice 10-minute reads to explain you why schema driven development is important. We will dive deeper into it in the events video, which will be coming after the event sources video, this video. Okay. So you see, I've put all my examples here. So your team can now start maintaining examples within one place itself in your definitions within your project and your event definitions out here. Okay. So here also in this event definition, we have given examples. Okay. That's why you saw that when the Swagger page opened up, this example name Godspeed was already set up for you. So these event sources start listening on different events. For example, health check. This file has one event which is listening on this event source http.post, and this is my post URL. All right. If you want to put any attributes like ID, path params, you can put them like this. Then I will dive deeper into the schema of events later, but you can now start configuring events for your different event sources. Every event source based on the plugin has a different format of this URI, the first line that you see, okay, which you can override when implementing your event source. By default, the REST event sources Godspeed provides, Express and Fastify both support this format. So you can use Express or Fastify, any one of these by this format. In this project, you can replace Express and Fastify easily by just going to event sources and overriding http.yaml from type Express to type Fastify. These plugins support all of these configurations, both Express and Fastify. It will just work out of the box for you, this particular replacement. Okay. This is now another event source of Kafka, listening on a message bus. It's called type Kafka. Here are the settings of Kafka. Again, the log attributes. Now you can start listening on Kafka events. So here is an example event of Kafka in LOS project, which is on an online repository, gs-node-templates. Go there and check LOS project. You will find all of this there. So in Kafka, again, only the first line of my event source has changed. I am listening on event source Kafka. This is my topic. This is my group ID. Rest everything is same as HTTP, GraphQL, any other event source. That's the beauty of working with Godspeed. You have one way to define how your events look, and only what changes is this first line of configuring the URI of your particular event, like the endpoint or the topic or whatever uniquely defines your event. So now the last bit of setting up event sources in your project is, of course, for every particular event source, there are maybe variations in configuration. Our Fastify and Express have same configuration so far. Kafka will have a separate configuration. GraphQL is mostly again like Fastify and Express, just the same actually. And cron is a bit different. Cron doesn't take any of this. Cron just takes your time expression in the first line again as the URI, which you can check in documentation. Salesforce again varies again in the first line itself of how it changes. You can check all of these things in the documentation. Coming to this point of the configurations, like when we configured the event source here, HTTP event source, for example, right? So we are using here dynamic. You see this this particular thing, the angular bracket and percentage means we are inserting a JavaScript code inside here. Okay. So this is dynamically computing when the project starts. We are checking the config key within that JWT and secret or key. Okay. What is this config object? This config object comes from this folder config on the left. This is node config, a very famous node module which we are using out here. It allows you to set up your configuration for local host setup, development environment, production environment, so on and so forth. Okay. And by default, it allows you to keep your default YAML, which has your default configurations. All of this is loaded in Godspeed and given as a config key. In Godspeed and default configurations, you can set up logging, your cache, and also for your inline scripting, default language is JS, but you could even change it to CoffeeScript. Okay. Then you have custom environment variables. This is how node config handles it. You define again a JSON key value shape here. These are all environment variables, but they are loaded in a JSON nested key value as you have defined. So if we go to http.yaml, we are using config.jwt.secret.key. It's available here, config.jwt.secret.key, which is JWT secret, your environment variable. Okay. These environment variables can be exported via the shell, or you could in your project create a .env file. When you'll run Godspeed serve, it should just load this environment automatically within your project. So this was about event sources in Godspeed. So I'll just recap in short. Event sources are different sources which capture events through different mechanisms. These can be your REST API servers, GraphQL servers, gRPC servers, cron event source, socket event source, message bus event source, Salesforce event source, any kind of source which helps you capture events into this service and process the events in your workflows and return a response. Okay. And this way your service is connected with your internal microservices, external world third party application, mobile client, web client, so on and so forth. And to add event sources into your project, you need to run the command Godspeed plugin add. And then once you run Godspeed plugin add, you can install those event sources, which will start showing in an SRC event sources and types. And once you have installed these, you can configure these event sources as you see. GraphQL, this is HTTP, all the same. They all support same configuration. So far, the three I've shown you, except for Kafka, which is more simple, because in Kafka, there is no concept of authentication and authorization. But even if you want to customize any event source, including Kafka, like for example, in your messages itself, you are sending some kind of headers which you want to authorize first before processing this message. You could do that technically. For that, you may just want to customize the event source, which we'll now look into the upcoming videos. Watching this video, you are able to install an event source and create one custom event for that event source and run it. Do check the Godspeed LOS starting template in our gs-node-templates repository. You can clone it. I will show you here gs-node-templates. These node templates have a full stack React app and loan origination system project. This is the one I'm talking about right now. It has your examples out here itself. All your event sources configurations you will find here. Okay. Feel free to play around and let us know how you like it. Thank you for watching. Have a lovely day. Bye bye.